Hello and welcome to the BBZ Poker channel. I'm Jordan Drummond, aka BBZ. Today we have got a very special piece of content. We have partnered with PokerStars to bring you guys a totally free WCOOP boot camp to help prepare you for their WCOOP series that starts in September. Week 1 of the boot camp is already completed in the BBZ Discord. We have got the very first video that we did here for you to enjoy.
Good morning, everybody. We are going to let this run for a couple minutes. We'll wait till the hour before we start. So this is meant to be, pretty interactive. If you guys have questions along the way, feel free to ask them, and I will do my best to try to answer them. All of the sessions throughout the bootcamp will be recorded and then uploaded to the BBZPoker.com website. The content will be made available for free until the bootcamp ends. Okay, so you can also message me privately as well. You can send any messages that you want to send. You can send them directly to BBZ Poker, and that will, like, if you have a question, you don't want anybody else to know that you asked the question or whatever. Some people get shy. They feel more comfortable when they can just directly message the host. And that'll be true of all the hosts. All of the sessions today will last 50 minutes, 50. They will not last 60 minutes. They will not last an hour. That just gives us some time to roll over to the next coach, make sure everybody can take a 5-minute break, grab a coffee, whatever. All right, let's go. So welcome to the 2025 PokerStars WCOOP Boot Camp. They're hosting a series, and I'd encourage you, to go check that out. And yeah, they've contacted us to host this little training program for you guys. So with that, we are going to kind of get right into it. So this is the syllabus for today. So I am obviously starting things off. I'm Jordan, aka BBZ. This is BBZ Poker, and yeah, we're gonna focus on some basic stuff once we get into the actual poker. We're gonna take a look at just some tricks, some things that are like helpful for remembering and understanding what's going on, and then we'll use a trainer to practice and to take a look at one of the most important or the most important spot in the game. And then I'm going to hand things off to Pwndidi. Adam, he's been working with us for a long time. He's very good. He's been my student for a very long time. He's been a very significant EV/BB Pro 100 winner at a very competitive ABI for a long time. He communicates the ideas really well, and you guys should enjoy his sessions and find him super helpful. Pwndidi doesn't really need much of an introduction. Alex is active in the super high roller live circuit. So he's played Triton events. He's played, WSOP, 100K plus buy-in tournaments. So if you're not familiar with Pwndidi, you probably should be. He does have a lot of, he teaches a lot for us. He's in the BBZ Poker seminar library. So if you're trying to get, more access to guys like Alex, the BBC Poker seminar library is a great way to do that. And then lastly, we're going to be closing today with apestyles. John Van Fleet, been a friend of mine for almost as long as I've been in poker, probably like 12 years or so. He's very, very good. He's also played Triton events. And uh, you know, I don't need to tell you these guys win, right? So these guys are big winners. And yeah, you guys are, as am I, very lucky to have these guys teaching today. Okay, so we're going to go over just some quick pre-flop pointers. Again, I'm moving through this information pretty quickly, and then we're going to mess around with the trainer. You guys can draw on the screen. I don't know if I should have said that, but please don't draw on the screen, but you can do it. So just a heads up, someone drew a line. That wasn't me. Okay, so today we are going to talk about pre-flop pointers. Okay, so when it comes to understanding pre-flop ranges, you only need to focus on memorizing the perimeter of the range, which is the outline of the range or the bottom of the range. Okay, those are all the same thing. So focus on memorizing the perimeter, outline, bottom of the range. There's a basic rule that we can follow. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so this is very helpful for newer players or people who don't yet know the preflop ranges like the back of their hands. This is very helpful for understanding those preflop ranges. Okay, so 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 just means that we're going to open suited fives from the button, suited sixes from the cutoff, and then suited sevens from the hijack. Then we're going to open offsuit 8s from the button, offsuit 9s from the cutoff, and offsuit 10s from the hijack. And then you obviously need to understand that ranges will only tighten as we move to earlier positions. They obviously don't get wider. Okay, so what does that mean? What does that actually look like? I don't know if I can get rid of this like thing, but whatever, it's fine, I guess. So whatever. So here are the suited 5s. This is the button. So we're looking at a button opening range at 40 big blinds. We have suited 5s here. We move to the cutoff. We look at the cutoff opening range. We see suited 6s here. So obviously, like, there will be some other hands that you'll open, but this is the stable floor of the range. You're going to open all the suited 5s where you won't open all the suited 4s. So all the suited 5s, all the suited 6s, and then the hijack will open all the suited 7s. Okay, so 5, 6, 7. We move back to the button. Offsuit combos. Offsuit 8s for the button. Offsuit 9s for the cutoff. Offsuit 10s for the hijack. Okay, so 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, very helpful. If you don't know the pre-flop range is like the back of your hand, it's really, really important. Okay, why is it really important? It's really important because when you make river decisions, so it's not just about getting the pre-flop ranges right so that your range matches up with a solver. Okay, when you make river decisions, the hands that you know, if you looked at a solver, or if you're thinking about your own range, you need to know what hands you have that are available to bluff with. So you can think about, and I probably should have put this on a slide, but it's fine. You can think about your bluffing range on the river as your pre-flop range minus the cards on the board in most situations. Okay. In most situations, when you bluff the river, you're going to bluff the river with high card hands. And if you're bluffing the river with high card hands, then your pre-flop range minus the cards on the board equals the high card hands that are left in your range. And then you can bluff with those hands. Okay. And then typically you're going to try to bluff with, on average, the worst of those hands, right? But if you don't know your pre-flop range, if you get your pre-flop range wrong, or if you have a different pre-flop range than the tool that you're using to study the river is using, then you're lost and you can't really navigate the river very well. Okay. So it's really, really important. I can't stress it enough. You have to get the pre-flop ranges down to the point that they're basically perfect. Okay. It's based that part of it is almost rote memorization. But oh well, there's not, you don't have to memorize that much in this game, in my opinion. I'm not particularly good at memorization, to be honest with you. But the pre-flop ranges are the exception. You do have to sort of suck it up and get those down. Okay. Understand that in most low to mid stakes metagames, villain VPIP, which is just voluntarily putting money into the pot. So villains VPIP and then the pot size are generally going to be too low. Okay, so that just means that the pots don't get big enough. So that means that people are too tight in various ways. They don't raise first in enough. They don't 3-bet enough. They don't 4-bet enough. They don't defend versus 3-bet enough. They tend to c-bet sort of enough, to be honest with you. So I'm not going to say that. But they don't flop check raise enough. They don't overbet the turn enough. They don't attack capped ranges well enough. They don't shove for multiples of the pot on the river versus completely capped ranges enough, and so on. So the pot sizes tend to be a little bit too small. And when the pot sizes are too small at lower metagames, that typically is a tailwind for the bottom of the range. So if you think about the weakest hand in your range, it just wants to win the pot pre-flop. It doesn't want to get action. So the less action it gets, the better the equity realization is, the better off you are. So oftentimes, if you look into someone's database who's playing a lot of poker and you look at how they're doing with the weakest hands that they're supposed to open, they're usually winning more money than you would expect. Okay. So you may hear some really good players at some point encourage you to open wider. That would be the reason why. Okay. For big blind defense versus raise first in, just again, a quick pointer. Remember that the big blind will never fold suited hands versus a linear raise first in, min raise in chips. So what does that mean? That just means that if the under the gun guy opens, this is the earliest position. Okay, so this is under the gun. This is the strongest range at this table right now. Okay, so under the gun opens 17.5%. If you look at the big blind counter strategy here, there are no suited hands that fold. This is a linear min raise. So what does linear mean? Linear just means that this range is opening hands from the top down. So the best hand, and then the second best hand, and the third best hand, and then the 10th best hand, and the 20th best hand. That's how this opening range works. A polar range would be like the top and the bottom. Okay. A condensed range would be like just stuck in the middle. So you might hear some of the coaches use that language today or next week. And condensed means like the middle. Polar means the top and the bottom. Linear means from the top down. Okay. I don't necessarily expect everyone to explain everything to you as you go. So some people will probably make some assumptions that you know that you know things that you might not know. So that's why, I'm just explaining some of the language to make sure that you guys don't get lost. Okay. And now we're going to do like just a quick question. When does the big blind fold more versus the hijack than versus the button? So I see Adam's in here. Thank you for being here, Adam. This question is not for you, Adam. For the rest of you guys that are in here, when does the big blind fold more versus the hijack than versus the button? You can type the answer to me privately. You can message me with you can message me with the answer privately. You can post it in the Zoom chat. However you want to give me the answer. Class participation points. You get nothing, but it's still fun. When does the big blind fold more against the button than against the hijack? All right. So this is a normal situation. So this is just like 40 big blinds. You guys will probably hear a lot about 40 big blinds throughout this boot camp. Something like 25 to 50 big blinds. You guys will probably hear about those stack depths being the most important stack depths to a tournament poker player. There are a lot of stack depths. They all are at least kind of important, but that's where most of the hands are typically concentrated, particularly in online tournaments. So, but here, if we look at the button opens and we're looking at the big blind counter strategy, we see the big blind folding 11.9%. If we look at like the hijack open, and the big blind's fold percentage is now 21.4%. If we look at the UTG open and the big blind counter strategy, the fold percentage is now 31%. So what do we see? We see that the fold percentage rises as we move around the table. So the button doesn't fold, the big blind doesn't fold much against the button, right? And then the big blind folds progressively more as the positions tighten. But there is an exception to this rule, okay? This is how you should expect no limit hold'em to work for the most part. But the one exception to this rule is when the raise first in is polar, okay? So for example, here, the button only has 12 big blinds. So because the button has 12 big blinds, this is not going to be a linear raise first in. This is going to be a more polar raise first in. Again, introducing you guys to some of the language. It's very important as you like communicate with higher level players. They're going to use some of this language a lot. Okay. So what does polar mean? It means the top and the bottom. So if you look here, we're playing the best hands, aces through nines to a min raise, right? We're playing the suited ace highs to a min raise. And then we're playing the bottom of the range to a min raise. So you can see like the weakest hands that the button is trying to play also play to a min raise. These are all the weakest hands that the button's capable of playing here. These hands are folds, but this is still a polar raise first in. Okay, it's a strong polar raise first in, but this is a polar raise first in from the button. It's not linear. It's different from this range. Okay, because all of the hands here are min raising, right? And in this case, the hands that are a lot of these hands are shoving. So the dark red is shove. Okay, so the dark red is shove and the light pink is min raise. And so the light pink is a polar raise first in. Okay, as opposed to this button's raise first in, which was again a linear raise first in. Now, why is that important? Because the big blind folds more versus a polar raise first in than versus a linear raise first in. So the big blind's fold percentage here against the button is 36.4%. And if we go over here to like even like a UTG1 min raise, this is a linear raise first in. Why is this a linear raise first in? Because this player can't shove. You can't shove 37 big blinds from under the gun +1. That's just insane. It's way too deep. Okay, so the under the gun player min raises from this position, and the big blind folds 28.8%. So this is the one exception when we're talking about chips. We're not talking about PKOs. We're not talking about ICM. We're just talking about regular, straight up vanilla poker, right? No limit hold'em. Okay, this is the one situation where the big blind will fold more against the button than they will against an earlier position player, is if the button's raise first in happens to be polar. Okay, so here again the button's raise first in, this is what a polar range looks like, this is what the implications are. We have a 36.4% fold against the button. Against UTG we have a 28.8% fold, so we're actually folding more against the button than we would against UTG +1. Okay, and this is pretty much the only time that this will happen, again, outside of like ICM adjusted situations or like different formats like PKOs or something. Okay. All right. So I'm just kind of catching up with some of the questions. And all right, let's keep going. So now we are going to jump into the trainer once we finish with this component of this. And so we're just going to basically play around with the most important spot in the game. For you guys, the most important position for you to get good at will be the big blind, okay, by a landslide. So there's no other position that really comes close, okay. So when if you guys are trying to get better at the game and you're trying to learn the game, trying to study it, after you learn your pre-flop ranges, the most important position for you to practice, work on, study, if you go to YouTube and you just watch free content, that's fine, right? Like try to focus on what the good players that you're watching are doing from the big blind. If you subscribe to the seminars, start with the big blind, okay? And obviously, like we've got courses and stuff too. But if you're in the seminars are going to get you access to a lot of content, and many of you are already there. My general recommendation is to spend a lot of time studying the big blind. Okay, you go pre-flop, big blind. Okay, those are that's the way you study. Okay, so as we get into flop strategy, the goal here is just to deliver some need to know information regarding the flop. Generally speaking, you'll see on the flop the in position player playing against the big blind. So the flop will work as follows. The big blind is going to check the vast majority of boards. Okay, there will be a few boards that are exceptions. They tend to be low boards and they tend to be connected. Okay, those boards the big blind might do what we call donk betting, where they bet out of turn. Okay, but for the most part, the big blind is going to range check the flop, so they're going to check all of their hands, and the in position player will deploy one of two primary strategies. Right, they'll either bet their whole range, so they'll bet all the hands in the range, or they'll mix. So those are the only two real options that are available. There is a third option that's available. That where the in position player checks all of their hands. That only happens if the big blind was meant to donk bet a lot and then didn't donk bet at all. Then the in position player, it's possible for the in position player to do no betting at all. But it's a rare exception. It comes up like later if you study the game a lot, but don't worry about it for now. So range betting involves, again, c-betting 100% of the hands. So that's just continuation betting all of the hands with no checks. And mixing typically involves betting the stronger hands in the range for value and to build a pot, and then betting the weaker hands while checking the medium strength hands. Okay, so essentially betting the top and the bottom, which is a more polar betting strategy, and then checking back the middle. That's approximately speaking what's going to happen when you see a range mix. So if we play with the trainer and we look at what the solver or the AI is doing when it mixes the flop, you'll see a tendency on average to bet really strong hands and bluffs, and a tendency on average to check more medium strength hands. Okay. Yeah, and so that's it for this part, this quick segment here, and we are going to jump into the trainer over here. Okay, so we're going to spend some time here. We're going to focus on the big blind for the reasons that I've already mentioned. Big blind's the most important position in the game. We will take a look at the in position flop strategy in a lot of cases, just so that we can kind of touch on some of the ideas that we're up against, and sort of go from there. Okay. Yeah, the question might have been written incorrectly. Like it got copied over by somebody to the WCOOP slides. Maybe there was an error. Maybe I made the error. It's totally possible. So if there was a mistake, I apologize. Okay, so we'll just keep going now. Hopefully that was clear, in spite of the bad question. And yeah, so here, what do you guys want to do, right? So we're in the big blind. I told you guys, for the most part, we're going to be range checking on the flop unless there's a low connected board, right? This is not really a low connected board. So you should probably assume we're going to check, right? And so we're going to check here. And I'm going to change this really, nope, that part's fine. There we go. Pause after action. That's all I wanted. Okay, so the button has checked back the flop. So this is not a board where the button has range bet the flop. The button has elected not to bet the flop. They've checked, so they're mixing. Okay, so we identify that they're using the second strategy. They were probably mixing the flop. So what do you guys do now? Okay, yeah, we continue to check. It's important to at least briefly discuss like how we would want to bluff, right? For the most part, this will be equity driven, which will mean that you're going to bluff with straight draws, which would be like anything with a queen or an eight, to a lesser extent something with a king. Obviously, we have spades and hearts, and we also have that's flush draws, straight draws, okay. And on this board, that's going to be pretty much it. But it's important. You're going to see a bias towards bluffing with spades and hearts as well. in particular, probably hearts, because when we bet and our bet fails, we get called. We're going to be getting called by one of two suits. The two suits are spades and hearts, right? So this player is not going to have like a lot of density in the calling range around, clubs. There's no real reason to do that, right? This player will have a lot of density in their calling range around diamonds. Okay. The one exception, like the only caveat that like if someone who was a really really high level player was watching and wanted to point something out, they would say that clubs and diamonds for me block trips, which is true. So the only two ways for this player to have trip nines around the lower parts of the curve. So like for example, the suited fives that are in the button's opening range. When the button has 9-5, has trips with 9-5, the only two ways to have trips with 9-5 are to have 9-5 of diamonds or 9-5 of clubs. Okay, so it is possible that you see specifically something with like the 5 or 6 of diamonds or the 5 or 6 of clubs. If you see that hand behave a little bit differently, particularly on the river, that would be the likely reason why. But yeah, this hand's just gonna check fold. Okay. So we can press go study with this tool, and we can go ahead and take a look at a couple of the streets here. So we're going to take a look at first the flop strategy here. So this is the buttons strategy on the flop. We range checked, so that there's nothing really interesting here. We're just gonna see a bunch of green. So we check all of our hands. This is, again, if you really are newer, a lot of this language can be overwhelming, and not all of the coaches are gonna, like, just because they're human, like they're not all gonna take a lot of time to explain all of the language that they're using. And so range check just means we're checking, all of the hands that we can possibly have in this spot. This is our range, and if we're range checking, we're checking the whole thing. Okay, so this is the in position strategy, and you can see, at least when we isolate this check, you see some of the medium strength hands that we spoke about earlier, very featured very prominently. So if you look at like essentially like the biggest squares, okay, this means that you're playing, the bigger the square is, the more like the high frequency you're playing that hand. So this hand's going to show up a lot. And it's really more to the right, but whatever. This hand's showing up a lot, and it's being checked a lot. Pocket sevens, pocket sixes, pocket fives. This is a medium strength hand. What makes it medium strength? Well, it loses to a pair of nines, tens, and jacks, but it beats bluffs. So it beats the weakest hands, and it loses to the strongest hands. That's what is classifying this hand as a medium strength hand. Okay, so sevens, sixes, fives, hands like ace, king, etc. 9x no kicker like 9-5 and 9-6, 10x no kicker like 10-4 and 10-5 and 10-6, weak 10x, weak 9x. These are hands that make logical checks. Okay, so they are medium strength hands, and this is going to be some of the more, you're going to see these hands play this way at a higher frequency in the check line. Okay, when you decide to mix. All right, so in position has checked back, and we can now discuss what we do on the turn. So on the turn, first of all, if the in position player is checking back medium strength hands, the 9 pairing is sort of, it's a good card, but it's like, no, there are better cards. The in position player is going to be checking back 9x, and they're going to pick up trips. So that's going to have an impact on how big we bet. As a general rule of thumb, again, you're going to hear a lot of this from the other coaches throughout the day, but as a general rule of thumb, the more likely it is that you run into a really strong hand from your opponent, the smaller you're going to bet. So generally speaking, when someone checks back the flop, we can bet very large, because if they're checking back the flop, they're frequently checking back more medium strength hands, not really strong hands, and therefore we can bet bigger on average. However, this card gives the button a lot of really strong hands, which gets in the way of the ability to bet very large, and for that reason, you're seeing less really large betting and more smaller betting. Okay. So here we see like some of the Queen X that we talked about, right? You see some of the Queen X hands. You see some of the biases that we spoke about, at least a little bit, where there's going to be a bias towards betting the 1 heart or 1 spade versions of these hands, as opposed to the club diamond versions of these hands. So Queen 7 is more aggressive when it has hearts and spades, and less aggressive when it has clubs and diamonds. Okay. Queen 6 is more aggressive when it has hearts and spades, and less aggressive when it has clubs and diamonds. They're both open-ended straight draws, but one of these blocks your opponent from having flush draws that will call, right? If you think about betting Queen 6 offsuit, you're bluffing. The best case scenario is the other player folds, right? You can't predict the future. You're not hoping that the guy calls, then you river a straight, then you get value. That's beyond human capabilities, right? So if you're betting Queen 6 offsuit on the turn here, you're just hoping the other player folds. If the other player has hearts or spades, they're less likely to fold. So if you block hearts and spades, that's attractive, right? Blocking clubs and diamonds, that's going to be how this player folds the turn. on average. So that sucks. So we don't want these hands as much. Okay. Queen 5, you can see the same phenomenon. You see it over and over and over again. No limit hold'em. It's a big game. There's a lot going on, but it's very systematic. You can systemize the whole game. It takes a little bit of time. It takes some work, but it is a systemizable game. Like the game does obey by laws, principles, rules, and you can use systems to play it. Okay. So Queen 5, spades and hearts here is how we bluff the turn, as opposed to clubs and diamonds. Okay. Queen 4, spades and hearts, as opposed to clubs and diamonds. I know it sounds repetitive, but for people that have never seen this before, for some people it's like, holy smokes. It's like, yeah, that's how it works. Okay. We've got our flush draws over here, which is, I think, something that most people would expect, right? You guys expect to be bluffing the turn with spades and hearts for the most part. This was the Queen X component that we spoke about. This is like 8-6, so this is just like an 8, which I mentioned, right? Which is, you could bluff with some of this. In particular, you need spades and hearts. You can't bluff with this with clubs and diamonds. I think that's, and then we also mentioned like that you'd bluff with some King X, right? And King X is still going to obey the principle of bluffing with spades and hearts as opposed to clubs and diamonds. It's all going to obey that principle because that's the suit that your opponent's going to VPP you with. Okay. Oh, okay. I was like, you guys can see my big toe? I was like, that's interesting because my camera's pointed at my face, but it was somebody else. Okay. So, yeah, we can just continue from here, I think. The intention is going to be to check fold this hand, right? So that's going to be the plan. But just because the intention was to check fold doesn't mean that we can't, discuss how the spot works, right? We're trying to learn how the spot works. You guys are trying to learn how the spot works. I'm trying to teach you how things work. How playing this exact hand doesn't matter to me at all. I don't care at all. So we're trying to just learn how the game works, some rules we can use to play better. Understand some things that some good players might take into consideration, and call it a day. What do you guys think about on the river? How do you guys think this works? Okay, so first, there's a lot of value on this board for both players, right? But this player is probably not totally capped. So, bet sizes are probably not going to get too out of line. It's not that difficult for this player to have a straight, and it's not that easy for us to have a boat, right? We're not doing any flatting with pocket pairs above the board pre-flop. Like even eights might get mixed to 3-bet, I think. So at 40. So yeah, so I think that we're not going to have nines at all, tens or jacks, right? So then we have like 9-10 suited, sure, jack 9 suited, or 9-8 suited. We have those hands, right? But those hands obviously could also have bet the turn. So neither one of these two players has a lot of boats. Obviously, this player's not checking back a bunch of boats to the river. So boats aren't going to be high frequency plays for either player. Straights will be high frequency players for both. Will be high frequency holdings for both, right? Both players could have a queen somehow. So this player could still have checked down to the river with like Queen 8 suited, or Queen 8 suited is a bad example. Queen 10 suited, okay, is a hand this player could check back down to the river with. Ace Queen's are probably more likely candidate. Queen 5 suited or something's a possibility for the button. So yeah, both players can have straights. So again, there's no real. The language that you would hear people use would be, are the value bets asymmetric, which would mean like, do the value bets belong to the big blind and not the button? In this case, no. If the value bets were asymmetric, if the really strong value bets were asymmetric, you would see really, really, really big betting. So when you guys watch really high level players play and then they shove for like 6x pot or something, like they just move in here and they bet 38 big blinds, you'll occasionally see something like that. That'll happen because in their assessment, their opponent is capped around the value bets. Okay, they don't have, and capped just means they don't have the strong value bets. Okay, so that's not going to be the case here, not really. So those types of bet sizes are off the table for the most part. How do we think about bluffing by suit? Okay, so first of all, what do we want to bluff with? Well, we want to bluff with high card hands. Okay, there aren't that many of those on this board, to be fair, right? So anything with a 7 or higher in it, up to a queen, anything with a 7 through a queen is a straight or a pair. So we're going to be bluffing with stuff with a 6 or lower, and we're going to be bluffing with potentially like king high hands, right? To a lesser extent, ace high hands, but probably not. So should this hand bluff or not? It's actually close. I think probably not, but I do think it's close. You do have 6 high, which makes it very tempting to bluff. You're probably not going to get to use really big sizings, which means you won't get a lot of bluffs per unit of value. Again, if you're new, then that's like doesn't mean anything to you. But essentially what happens in no limit hold'em is the bigger you bet, the more you get to bluff per value bet. So if you bet really small, the way the ratios work, your opponent gets really good odds. You should be very careful about bluffing too often if you're betting small. If you're betting bigger, you can bluff a little bit more often. Okay, so I don't want to make this too math heavy because this is like supposed to be fun. Okay, so yeah, I'd probably check fold, to be honest with you. It's obviously the bottom. So when we think about bluffing, we think about bluffing from like some of the ideas that we use. Bluffing from the bottom of the range. Okay, this ticks that box. This is obviously the bottom of the range, right? Yes, you can have 4-3 suited or 4-2 suited, right? Yes, you know, you're going to have other hands that are offsuit that are similar to this one. Like you'll have 6-4 offsuit, you have 5-3 offsuit, right? You'll have 6-5 offsuit. So you have offsuit hands that are similar to this. So what's wrong with this hand? Like why would I not bluff with this hand if this hand's at the bottom of the range? The primary reason not to bluff with this hand is you have bad suits. Okay. Now what makes this suit, like what makes diamonds bad suits in general here? Okay. Well, what suits do you guys think the button's going to fold on the river? Right? Like what suits the button going to fold on the river? They're probably going to fold diamonds and clubs. That's what suits they're going to fold on the river. They're probably going to fold diamonds and clubs on the river. Why are they going to fold diamonds and clubs on the river? Because they probably bet spades and hearts on the flop or the turn, right? Spades and hearts are probably betting the flop or turn. So they're not going to have spades and hearts when they say check, right? This is how playing poker works, okay? You have to think about what the button would have done earlier. So the button did not bet. What would have bet? Spades and hearts probably would have bet. So what did not bet? Probably diamonds and clubs. So what are they going to fold? Probably diamonds and clubs. Okay. Again, this is all kind of probably. This hand's still very much the bottom of the range, and maybe it pure bets. Like it's really close with these suits, to be honest with you. This hand does pure bet. I'm wrong. Being wrong will happen. I'm okay with being wrong. We're gonna check out the bottom of the range. I'm gonna show you guys a little tool you can use in this. Where we go here. Okay. So this is your no-made hand block. Okay, guys? Now, what stands out about this block? It's not all the same color, right? This block's not all the same color. Okay? So what is this? This is mixing. So we have to figure out how we want to mix this. How we want to mix this block. Okay? So this is all 6 high. Pretty much, right? Like 6 high or worse. Okay? So it's clearly bluffing with the worst hands in this range. Okay? The worst hands are clearly being bluffed here. But you have to sort of get a grasp for the fact that you can't bluff with all of these hands. So we had, what was our hand, 6-3? We had 6-3 diamonds, okay? And the solution bluffs with 6-3 diamonds. That's fine. You're not going to get the answers right every time, so don't try to get the answers right every time. Like, don't get the answer wrong and then try to study so that the next time you just get that answer right. That's not really going to help you much. That's too narrow, right? You're trying to figure out how this scenario works in general. So what do I mean when I say that? Well, 6-3 diamonds is pure bluff. So it looks like I'm like the coach up here and it looks like I'm an idiot right now, right? But if you came up with the idea that 6-3 of diamonds was pure bluff, how would you mix 5-3 of diamonds? Right? Like what ideas are you going to use that's going to enable you to bluff with 6-3 of diamonds and not bluff with 5-3 of diamonds? I would say that for the most part, nobody's going to come up with any realistic ideas for bluffing with 6-3 of diamonds, but not bluffing with 5-3 of diamonds. There's nobody that's going to, like, you're just not going to do that, right? So this part of the range still doesn't pure bet. This part of the range mixes. So you have to have, as a human player, as us, not as the solver, you have to have your own ideas for how this block should mix, if you think it should mix, right? So the first thing is, a lot of you said, I have the bottom of the range. This is like pretty much the bottom. It's hard to have, a lot of hands that are worse than this. So I'm going to bet this hand all the time. And that's okay-ish. It's not terrible. I mean, like these hands bet a lot, right? However, they're also checking almost half the time. I mean, this block of hand is literally, it's very close to 50-50, right? It's 56, 44, right? So it's very close to 50-50 between bet and check. So if you bet 6-3, what tools are you using not to bet 5-4? Again, most of you probably don't have tools not to bet 5-4, right? So actually executing, even though this is a very narrow part of the range, we're just looking at the nothing part of the range. It's actually very difficult to do this very simple part of it, right? So what I was trying to communicate is that you're going to have to use tools, strategies to mix the bottom of your range, right? And you could see like one way would be like, hey, it's checking, at the top and betting, it's betting the deuces, which is the bottom of the hierarchy this way. It's betting the suited deuces. It's mixing the suited threes, and it's not really betting as much with the suited four. We're talking about the kickers. So suited deuce kicker bets pure. Suited three kicker bets a lot. Suited four kicker bets a lot less. Suited five kicker doesn't really bet at all. Okay. But also, which suits is it betting? Well, 6-5 is betting with spades. 6-4 is betting less with diamonds and clubs, betting more with spades and hearts. 6-5 offsuit over here. We see at least the margin more betting with like spades and heart kicker versions than diamonds and clubs. 5-4 we see spades and hearts. We see spades in particular. We see much less diamonds and clubs. 5-3 we see spades. This is spades over here on the left. We see diamonds and clubs betting a little bit less. Okay, so those are the ideas I was using. Okay, you can take them for you can assume they have merit, assume that they don't have merit, right? But essentially what I'm trying to do is I was thinking about the suits when I was evaluating the 6-3 suited. I elected not to bet, and that got me the wrong answer when I had 6-3 of diamonds, but it would have got me the right answer if I had 5-4 of diamonds. Okay, and conversely, if you had 5-4 of diamonds and you thought you should bet 6-3 suited, you probably would have screwed up 5-4 of diamonds. Okay, and the important thing is, from my perspective, that this block of hands mixes. So you can't just assume that because you're at the bottom of the range, you're going to bet all of these hands, because that's wrong. You have to, you need to correctly assume, in my opinion, like a better strategy is that you identify that these hands have to mix. And once you recognize these hands have to mix, then you have to come up with a strategy as a human player for doing that. And again, I put forward my ideas, right? So you can use the suited deuces the most, suited threes a lot, suited fours less, and then you can also organize it by suit. Okay, so that's how I think about it. Okay. Obviously, we're going to fold. So that part's easier. And the opponent had queen 10, which is one of the hands that we talked about that as a risk factor that they could have, right? Not a low connected board, so there's no donk betting. Okay. Everything that we're going to do, we're going to have a reason for doing it. We're not going to just like click buttons. So all of the plays we're going to make, we're going to have reasons for doing them, right? So this is a check. Pretty simple, but important. Just like, when you're very new, the things that you tend to do are very chaotic. You don't really have good reasons for why you're doing what you're doing, and you just tend to take actions, right? And we're trying to come up with like reasonable reasons for why we're taking the actions that we're going to take. Okay, so this we're going to continue to check. If we were to bet, we would be looking for things that are equity driven, so that would be straight draws, flush draws, and then to a lesser extent, we're going to be looking for equity and blockers against the calling range. So what are equity and blockers against the calling range? Equity and blockers against the calling range. Equity would be maybe even double overcards against the 7. So a hand like Queen 8, which has 2 overcards against a 7 and a 4. If you're going to push it beyond flush draws and straight draws, when you bet and get called, so your bet fails, you don't want to be screwed, obviously. So if you have 2 overcards, if you think about the hands your opponent checks back the flop and calls a bet with on the turn, some of the stronger hands that will do that would be a pair of 7s or a pair of 4s. So you might want to have equity against a pair of 7s or a pair of 4s. So that's double overcards to a pair of 7s, which we don't have. Okay. And then similarly, which suit do you want to bluff with here, guys? Which suit do we want to bluff with here? This is a question. You guys are going to answer it before we move on. What suit do we want to bluff with here? Like if we, with our offsuit hands, not with our suited hands, with our offsuit hands, what suit blocker do we want? We have an offsuit hand. What suit blocker do we want? You just want one heart. We just want one heart in our hand. Why do we want one heart in our hand? Because we just want to block the flush draw that the other player is going to call with. We know that when we bet with Queen 8, our opponent's going to call if they have King Queen of hearts, or if they have Ace Queen of hearts, or if they have Queen Jack of hearts. The opponent's going to call. And we hope that the opponent, if we bet Queen 8, we hope the opponent folds when they have Queen Jack of clubs. We hope the opponent folds when they have Queen Jack of diamonds, right? So when we have Queen Jack ourselves, so we have Queen 8 or Queen 9, and we're bluffing the turn, and we have the Queen of hearts in our hand, they can't call us with a Queen high flush draw. And that's good. That's what we want. We want them to fold. So we're going to be looking to bluff here with like offsuit hearts. This hand has there's nothing about the properties of this hand that would lead us to believe that it's an attractive candidate for bluffing. Okay, I've got 10 minutes left. Lost track of time. I didn't even know what time it was. Okay, so this is so first of all, let's just walk through the hand for people that are newer again, right? So here we checked range. This is the flop for the button. They mixed. How do we know they mixed? Because the guy said check. So we know he mixed. He's betting half the time, he's checking half the time, right? 55-45, bet check. Okay. How does the betting range work? Right? How does the betting range work? Well, there's jacks, queens, kings, and aces. They're all red. Those are all bets, right? There's a strong 10x component. Those are all red. Those are all bets, right? So what hands are checking a lot? Medium strength hands. We talked about this earlier in the session. Hands like pocket nines, pocket eights, pocket sixes, pocket fives. These hands, these are medium strength hands because they beat bluff, they beat air, they beat the weakest hands in someone's range. They beat the unpaired hands, but they lose to value bets like a pair of tens or like a pair of nines would lose to a pair of tens. Okay, so these are the hands that tend to mix on average, right? These are the hands that tend to check on average when you're mixing. More of the medium strength hands. So that when you look at this statistically, like you look at this breakdown of the range, right? The checking component does not have a lot of sets in it. The checking component does not have a lot of two pair or top pair in it. The checking component has a lot of ace high in it, a lot of second and third pair in it, okay? A lot of medium strength hands. Whereas this overbetting range, this betting range, does not have a lot of second pair in it. This overbetting range does not have a lot of under pairs in it. This overbetting range has a lot of top pair and over pairs in it, and then bluffs. Okay, so the betting range is polar, top, bottom. The checking range is condensed, more medium strength, middle. Okay, again, over the next, we're gonna do 3 days. The boot camp is gonna last 3 days. Friday this week, Friday next week, and Friday the week after. And again, like, some of the coaches, they're not going to explain their language. They're just going to say words, and you're going to, that's just, again, we got a bunch of guys in here. I've told them to take it slow because, keep the audience in mind. But like some guys, they're human and they're going to forget. Okay. Okay. So we get to the turn, and the big blind can now, against a medium, what is mostly a medium strength condensed range, the big blind can go on the offense. The 10 pairing is not as big a deal as the middle card pairing because the button was betting the flop with their top pairs already. So now we see that the button is very condensed in the middle. So if we actually look at the button's range here, we see that you'll see that they don't have a lot of top pair. This is top pair. You see how it's all grayed out? They don't have top pair, okay? They have these top pairs with no kicker, but these are suited. So there's only 2 of these right here, right? Like there's 10-5 of clubs and 10-5 of diamonds, right? There's 10-6 of clubs and 10-6 of diamonds, okay? So there's not a lot of trips in the button's range. Because there's not a lot of trips in the button's range is relatively speaking capped. It's not completely capped, but it's relatively capped. Larger bets are going to be effective because most of the hands the button has in this case are those medium strength condensed hands that we've talked about. If the risk that we run into the nuts is low, we're likely to be seeing larger bets. So that's why you guys are going to see these overbets here. And then obviously, the overbets get paired with bluffs. So the overbets, it's pretty easy to understand where the overbets are coming from. They come from trips. Those are the types of value bets that we want to overbet. And then how do we bluff, right? We spoke about having double overs to a 7 with a heart, right? So of course you could have jack 8. That's a straight draw. Okay. So we talked about straight draws. There's your jack 8, right? There's your 9-8. Those are straight draws. Okay. We talked about flush draws. Okay. There's your flush draw, your 8-3 of hearts, your 8-2 of hearts. Everybody finds these bluffs. So like if you watch a YouTube video and like you see some guy playing poker, you'll see these types of bluffs get utilized. And these are the bluffs that most people who are, amateur players, like novices, like they understand that these bluffs need to get utilized pretty quickly. Okay. The bluffs that people tend to overlook and miss are bluffs like Queen 9. Okay. And you see over here that the bluff with Queen 9 is primarily Queen 9 with a heart. Okay. You see the density. We have double overs to a 7 and a 4. Again, we want to think about if we bluff and our bet fails, what happened? Okay, fine. Let's look at the consequences. So we bluff. We can choose the overbet or we can choose a different size. It really doesn't matter. But if we bluff the turn and our bet fails, how did it fail? Well, if our opponent has a pair of 7s, they will call. Okay, fine. That is a contingency that we can plan for. If we bet the turn and we get called, what do we get called by? Probably not trips, because they don't have trips very often. This is a probabilistic game. We probably got called by a pair of 7s. It's a logical hand to check back the flop with. It's a logical hand to call the turn over bet with. Okay. So probably we're going to get called by a pair of 7s. Fine. Let's deal with that in advance. If we're likely to get called by a pair of 7s, let's plan for that. So as we go back and we look at the button's betting range, the big blind's betting range, we're going to plan for getting called by a pair of 7s. That's why you're not seeing bluffing with Queen 6. Okay. That's why we're bluffing with Queen 9 instead of Queen 6. because we're planning for the contingency of being called by a pair of sevens. Okay, so no queen six, five, four, three deuce, no jack six, five, four, three, right? No king six, king five, king four, right? Like very little. I'm not saying it's none, but like you can contrast king six with king nine. King nine's not a value bet. We're still bluffing. It just king nine performs much better against the hands that are likely to call, being a pair of sevens and a pair of fours. Okay, so double overs to a seven is really important when you're trying to establish which combos you want to bluff with, and you're evaluating your combo selection without excluding flush draws and straight draws, right? So queen eight with a heart, we already spoke about the merits of a heart, right? We spoke about the demerits of clubs and diamonds and spades here. They don't help you at all. So one heart with queen eight. Okay, king eight is less picky, but you can see that king eight's still much more aggressive with the one heart version than it is without the one heart version. Queen nine. Okay, one heart version, much more aggressive than the no heart version. King nine, that's a bit noisy. And it's a solver, okay? Like, it's not a human player, okay? I'm going to tell you the mistakes that you should sort of acknowledge you're going to make and just, like, accept it as the cost of doing business, right? You're not a solver, so you're not going to play, even at a high level, you're not going to play this exact strategy, right? That's fine. You can still capture the essence of this strategy. That's why trying to copy the answer like verbatim is not the point. You're trying to extract useful heuristics, strategies you can use to improve your strategy. You can't play this one. Like you can't, right? It's a moot point. You can't play this strategy. But what you can do is you can look at this strategy and you can use it to improve yours, right? So we're going to bluff with, one heart blockers here. We're going to do the same thing with queen jack over here, right? So we've got our one heart bias in our strategy. You can see king jack here bluffing with the one heart versions, right? King queen here is noisy. Fair enough. So that gives us like a perspective on how we would attack the turn, right? We're going to attack the turn with our straight draws, with our flush draws, double overs to a seven with a heart blocker. Okay. Yes. So you guys are going to notice that we're not bluffing with some of these ace highs. I got some questions about that, right? So the difference with the ace highs is that they have EV in the check option. Okay. So we're moving through a lot of theory relatively quickly, even though, and we're about to run out of time by about 5 minutes. So when we say we have EV in the check option, what does that mean? That means like if we check and they check, which is a possibility. It's not a given that when we check, they bet, right? So I'll show you when we check, there is obviously the probability that they check. Okay. So they have a 40% check. It's actually a high frequency outcome that they do not bet. Okay. So 40% of the time when we check, they will also check. And there are some hands in our range that will win 0 pot share. If we go pick a deuce river, very blank river, and some of the hands in the big blinds range here have 0 pot share when they say check, right? So queen five, for example, at this point, how much money does queen five win on a safe river when you say check? Nothing. It's queen five. You're going to lose. Like even the button will check back no hands that queen five will beat. As a result, the pot share that queen five captures is 0. Okay. Whereas the pot share that ace five captures, okay, saying check on the river, is 35%, which is massive if you think about it. Like it's just ace high, and it's worth almost a third of this pot still. And it's worth almost a third of this pot on the turn a lot of the time, right? If you think about it again, when we say check on the turn, our opponent's going to check 40% of the time. And then at a reasonable fraction, we're going to get a blank river. And then our ace five offsuit is going to be worth 1/3 of the pot, which is massive. Okay. Now, if we go back and we look at the river again and we look at some of the hands we were bluffing with previously, how much is our queen eight worth? Because I looked at queen five, but really that was a silly example. If we look at queen eight, which is a hand that we were talking about bluffing with, queen eight with a heart specifically, we're talking about bluffing queen eight with a heart specifically. How much is queen eight with a heart worth if we say check? It's worth 0. It's right here. Tells you. This is the EV tab. The EV of our queen eight is worth 0. It makes no money. So that means that the incentives are structured in such a way that we're going to stay away from bluffing with our ace highs, because if we check and the opponent checks, which is again a 40% probability, and then we get to the river, across a range of rivers, ace five might be worth as much as 35% of the pot. A third of the pot. That's huge. Queen eight, which is the hand that we actually bluffed with, queen eight with a heart. Okay. Queen eight across that same outcome, that same 40% probability of a turn check by the opponent, followed by, an innocuous river. Queen eight will be worth 0% of the pot. So if you have a choice between bluffing with one hand that's worth 0% of the pot and bluffing with one hand that's worth 35% of the pot, Why would you bluff with the one that's worth 35% of the pot when it's with check? You're going to bluff with the less valuable hand. So we take queen eight, we convert it to bluff because it's worthless to us otherwise. We take ace eight, and because it's valuable to us in a number of different scenarios, we preserve that value by checking it. Okay? And with that, it's 7:50. So that brings us to the end of this session. I will take a couple questions if you guys, if there are any, but I've tried to deal with the questions as I went. So hopefully we're at least sort of okay. And hopefully you guys got some value out of the session and enjoyed it. Okay. So yeah, again, just a reminder, these sessions will be recorded. The next session is going to take place in 10 minutes. Yeah, it's going to be feature Adam. So I'm going to bounce, terminate the session, and I will see you guys later. Thank you very much. Quick reminder, BBZ Poker for your poker needs. You guys want to learn anything? Go to BBZ Poker. We'll help you. How do you determine whether to bluff with a hand like King 8 with 2 overs and a heart or a hand like 6-3 with a gut shot? They're going to compete. So those types of hands, so gut shots, for example, will compete. Like you're going to be bluffing with straight draws and there's going to be mixing, right? For sure. So you're at this. It's a good question. Like you're going to have bluffs where like both of them are close, like for example, like Jack 8, you're bluffing with Jack 8 sometimes, right? And to be fair, even if you have a heart, you're bluffing with Queen 8 with a heart sometimes. It's not a pure bluff, okay? But you're observing how things work. It's, in my experience, one of the better ways to think about it is you're learning how no limit hold'em doesn't work. You're learning that it's really bad to bet with like, Queen 8, you learn that it's really, today, what did you learn really? You learned that it's really bad to bet with Queen 3 offsuit with clubs and diamonds. Betting right in this particular situation, you learned that betting this way is really bad, right? And you learned that this was an option, right? It's not that this is a pure bet, but this is an option and this is not an option. And you're building your knowledge of what is a viable option for you to do in certain spots and what is off the table because it's terrible, right? So yeah, a lot of the time you're learning about what not to do. Okay. All right, you guys, thank you very much. And yeah, good luck, Adam. And I hope you guys enjoy Adam's session in a few minutes. Bye.